There's an awful and painful memory that I have to live with, and that is when I found out my daughter had autism, and I instilled shame into her unwittingly, and I deeply regret that.
Dez Rock, Powerhouse CEO, is back
to talk about her biggest struggles yet.
What were the biggest pain points when you look back on your life that you wish you had known?
Friendships and relationships. I didn't realise I was making so many people uncomfortable as I was. And I don't like that. That was never my intention. My intention was to build a safe space for people. You could tell me anything, but the person across from you may not feel that.
Were you proud to be different even before your diagnosis?
No, I was steeped in shame. I wanted nothing more than to fit in and be like everybody else. I wasted a good amount of time, Alex, trying to be liked.
What do you think the costs are of not undoing that? This episode is dedicated to anyone who has wet laundry in their machine. I know you've probably heard this a million times on other podcasts, but following or subscribing really helps the show. And the more followers we get, the more likely it is that I'm able to book new, exciting, and insightful guests for the show. So, if you subscribe, I will continue to keep to my word and promise to never let this podcast be sponsored by Huel. Dez, thank you so much for coming back. Last time we spoke a lot about small talk, and what do you think it is about ADHD that makes you go straight to the childhood trauma when you meet someone new?
Well, I try not to go straight for the childhood trauma, although I've been known to. I think it's more of a case of I prefer integrity and honesty and, so I prefer real conversations than what we label as small talk, which is about the weather and about, all the rest of it. And so I tend to bond over that because I think that there's vulnerability and honesty in that. And so I look to connect with people on that level because it's honest. It's an honest conversation. It's a more real conversation.
If you look back throughout your whole life, can you see yourself being drawn to neurodivergent people?
Oh God, yeah. And I think I have lost friends because I have dragged neuro-beige people into honest conversations and they don't like it. I don't know if you've realised. They don't like it. They'll do anything to avoid, the hard questions. They'd rather stay in that. And I understand. I've learned to understand that that's what they prefer. But, that was, that's the difference between pre-diagnosis and post-diagnosis is that you can see things a lot more clearly now.
What is it, do you think, it is about small talk that you find, because I'm the same, so not excruciatingly painful, but just so unstimulating?
That's exactly why. It's unstimulating. And so we look to find and you and I have done this, we've connected on something and it's just, you know when you feel it with another diverse person because it's almost like that you're on the same wavelength and it buzzes, it's like, ooh, and it feels like a hum and you're like, that's my person. I found my people. This is my tribe. When you're doing small talk, you don't get that. And, we're always after the next dopamine hit. And so there's a lack of dopamine hit, which is why we bail out. Like I think I don't know what your cap is, but 5, 10, 15 minutes of small talk and I'm looking for the exit,
Does that ever turn into oversharing though?
Right. So I will overcompensate because I'm more aware of it now. But when I wasn't aware of it, I would small talk. This is boring. This is not necessarily what's going through my mind consciously, but let's say subconsciously. This is boring. I will now ask some deep diving questions. Oh, I like these answers. I like where this is going. And I'll share because when I share and show vulnerability, they tend to share and show vulnerability. Now I'm interested. And now this is, and it'll also say, oh, now this is a real conversation. This is a more authentic conversation. And I'll ding, 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 like the neurons fire up and everything, the lights light up and I'm interested. That's what's going through my mind.
Is it like fast paced or can you handle slow talkers as well?
So I've now had to learn the art of, just like we ask people who are neuro-beige to understand us, I've now had to understand them and to say that what I enjoy doesn't necessarily bring them peace and joy and comfort or put them in a good place. So when I'm around people who are, not as neuro-spicy, I do rein it in, and I keep it in a safe spot because I like to make sure that the person in front of me, I didn't realise I was making so many people uncomfortable as I was. And I don't like that. You know, once you're aware of that, that's not what, that was never my intention. My intention was to build a safe space for people to, you know, because you could tell me anything and I keep it. But the person across from you may not feel that. They might feel like, I don't like this. They're forcing me to, you know, I don't know you. And that's certainly not the what I wanted to evoke. So once I became aware of that, I do pull back now, you know, when I'm in situations like that, yeah. I'm learning to pull back.
Do you think you're really good now at spotting a neuro-beige person if you meet someone?
Oh, God, yes.
What are the key signs, do you think?
You know, 5 minutes of talking to somebody, I can usually tell of where they're at. And it may be because, like I said, you know, you kind of like, how's it going? You know, and you see if they're willing to dip their toe into deeper waters. And if they're not, and if they are, if they've got a special interest that they're sharing, ding, ding, you know. If they, there's tell signs, we all know. And if you don't hit any of those, you know you're hitting a beige person.
If you were at dinner with 4 neuro-beige people, what would that conversation look like?
For who? Them or me?
Maybe for the waiter.
And the waiter would be sitting there watching me roll my eyes back. But now, for them, it's going to be heaven. And most likely, they're going to need a few drinks in them to relax, whereas I wouldn't, right? That's because I've been in those situations and I watch them as they need to ease into, say, if they want to have, you know, that sort of stuff, whereas I don't need to ease in. I'm happy to get there straight there. So what would it look like? It would look like, if I'm being really honest, it would look like me putting a mask on.
What is it within you that makes you feel like you have to put on a mask?
Because the intention, the simple answer would be to act appropriately in that situation. So if I'm acting appropriately in that situation, it would be like, okay, I don't want anyone upset here. Certainly not my intention. I don't want anyone to, you know, I don't want to look weird or I don't want to whatever. So on goes the mask, right? Yeah. And the mask would make sure that I would pull back, make sure I'm listening more than I'm talking, make sure I'm paying attention, make sure I'm asking the right questions. Oh, definitely, yeah. That's what it would look like. Does it look like that for you?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can tell straight away. Very similar to you by the sound of it. You've sort of got this auto radar between neurotypical and neurodivergent. You can always, if you go in and you say something quite personal too early, they either accept it and they reciprocate with something, or they look at you as if to say like, whoa, that was too much.
Yes.
You pick up on that instantly.
Yes.
The mask suddenly goes on. Like it's elastic. It just shoots it back onto the face.
Kind of like, well, for me, not that I can imagine this, but for me, it's like, do you know the bank teller when they press the button and up goes the shield? Yeah. That's how fast it is. Yeah.
And if you're at the dinner table with 4 neuro-spicy people, what would that look like?
Oh, it's brilliant. It's brilliant because you know you're with your tribe and you know it doesn't matter what you say. Especially the right ones. And I've been in this situation where we start sharing, okay, what is your, and I'll ask you too, what is your most useful and useless special interest? You know, because we all have the, special interests that took us down the garden path that did nothing for us. It was absolutely useless, right? No use whatsoever. And then there's ones that are like, that actually came in really handy knowing all of that. And we'd go around the table and then share and all of these brilliant answers would come forward. You cannot do that with, because then that'd be, first of all, but what are you talking about with special interest? Like, but you know what's your most useless special interest that you've gone down?
God, I've spent so many hours on YouTube looking up space videos. Obsessed with like the concept of space, planets, but it hasn't helped me in any other way.
Right.
Other than really probably procrastinating.
Right.
And I forget 99% of it.
Right.
Of what I watch. What's your special interests? Or
the useless one?
Yeah.
So it was, it's really useless. It's not come in handy at all. But could I make a cup of espresso with no electricity off grid, right? So down that rabbit hole I went, right? Like what tools would I need? And if I'm useless, I've never been in a situation where I need to do that. But there it was. But I know how to do it now. So if you're ever with an astrophysicist and I'm ever in a situation where I need to make an espresso off grid, we are good to go. Yeah.
During lockdown, did you find any special interests?
Yes, I did. Off-grid camping and was a big one. So I really wanted to touch the earth, touch some grass and stuff like that. So camping and stuff like that, and camper vans. And I researched and all I could about that. So I learned about solar. I learned about harnessing that. I learned about everything to do with RVing that was off-grid. And actually built a bus out that was that, and then so I put that all into use and then did that too, and it was brilliant. Brilliant.
I remember getting obsessed with blue whales and being fascinated with where they mate and going deep down the Google rabbit hole. I can't remember any of it.
Well, I'm fascinated just hearing about that. How do they mate?
Really deep. Okay. No one's ever witnessed it because it's so deep underwater.
Really?
Yeah, I can't remember the exact depth, but I remember just being fascinated by the whole concept. And then I just got into the deep sea obsession, and for a couple of days, that's all I was thinking about. But then I moved on to plants, and I bought loads of plant pots for my balcony and filled them with different types of plants. And that was kind of a couple of weeks. That was my next obsession.
Yeah. I went down the rabbit hole of becoming the best pitmaster I could possibly be and making the best smoked brisket, Texas-style brisket I could do. My family really, really appreciated that one. They still do, because I went all in, that was a good one for them. So that was a useful one, and there's some that would, but I don't think I'm joking when I say useless, but to us, because we're getting the dopamine hit and we're finding it really exciting and all that sort of stuff. And more importantly, we're expanding our knowledge, and that's what we love to do in an area. Just because we deem it useless doesn't mean it really is. Yeah.
It's such a good point, because it might be useless in the long term, but if it's serving the purpose of entertaining you in the short term, then that is a useful thing to do.
Correct. There's also nothing useless about educating yourself on a topic either.
What does someone have to do to come into Dez's inner circle?
I think that right now it's a lot more difficult than it used to be. I'm very precious about who I spend my moments with. But I'm still think that it's relatively easy to have a chance to get to know me. But I think I'm a lot easier to cut people out, or stop, because same thing, my time is precious and I'm a bit limited on who I want to spend time with. I was more of a people pleaser back in I think most women are, by the way, but I was more, I certainly am not. And again, that's very typical of women after a certain age too. They're like, I don't want to put up with this anymore. I only want to be with the people I like.
I've spoken to lots of people on the podcast who struggle to maintain friendships.
That's always been my downfall as well, yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I think, as I touched on that before, I think that the conversations I would constantly lead, I would exhaust people from leading them down deep and meaningful conversations, whereas that takes a lot. For me, I live there, I'm happy there. Most people who are not necessarily, who have the diversity don't. So that is exhausting for them, and I've come to understand that, yeah.
Do you think it's just like an incompatibility between neurotypes?
Yeah, because my intention's always been and that was the misunderstanding. It's just but I really like you and I would do anything for you, and my intention is never to hurt you. My intention was never to bore you. My intention was never to exhaust you, right? But yet ABC, what the true fact is that I have done all of these things and you're exhausted by me, and then you're like, I can't deal with this anymore. And that was never my intention to bring those feelings out. So I'm more mindful of that, which ties into the question you asked before, what's it take to get around near me? I'm very mindful of I will spare both of us, If I see that there's an incompatibility, then I will say I'm now better at keeping people in the right circles. For starters, I didn't understand circles, boundaries. You can call them whatever you like, but inner circle, boundary, outer circle, and blah blah blah. As you go, and like a target board, a dart board, you have inner circle and it grows out, and then I will know where to put you.
What would someone have to do if they were in your inner circle to be removed from it?
Betray my trust.
And what might that look like?
Well, betrayal of trust looks like lots of things, doesn't it? So it could be any of those, really. Anything that you can imagine is a betrayal of trust. If I feel it, And if I feel like, it would be quite swift, unfortunately, straight after that. And I deliberate a lot. Like I self-analyze a lot. And it would take me a while to get there. But once I've achieved the fact that this is what you've done was out of malice, like I'll look for the intention. If I think this is out of malice and this is out of whatever, there was no compassion, there was no authenticity, there was no, if I feel that, then that's a done deal for me.
We've had quite a few people on the podcast over the last 5 or 6 months. They've come on and they've been incredibly articulate, appearing to be incredibly confident. They've had great eye contact. But then speaking to them afterwards in the following weeks, they've revealed and opened up that they were actually struggling an immense amount. And in some rare occasions, they resorted to alcohol the night before to deal with the nerves of coming on.
Okay.
Why do you think some people with ADHD have such a gap between the version of them they present in public and what's going on inside their minds?
So why are they anxious? What's causing the anxiety is what I'm hearing. Is that right?
What's causing that, but also what's causing the gap between what's going on, the anxiety that's going on in their head and how they're presenting in public? Because they've come on the show, they've appeared to be very confident, but
unsure of if they're going to be accepted or not. That's what causes the anxiety. If you're not sure if you're going to be accepted for who you are, anxiety is going to flare up. This is a high-pressure situation, right? Because I've got people listening. You're asking questions that I'm not going to sure how I'm going to answer. Of course, it's anxiety-inducing. So if I felt like I don't know if I'm going to make the biggest fool of myself, or I don't know how I'm going to come across. Will people like me? Won't they like me? What you're going to think of me? If all of these are running through my mind, of course I'm going to need, what do they used to call it, mother's help, to get through the situation. Fortunately, I really like you, Alex. I didn't have that anxiety coming in here and feel very comfortable talking to you because I've already assessed and thought you're my people.
What gave it away that I was your type of person?
The conversation we had off the record after our first discussion.
Typical
and I remember
ADHD.
that vividly because we both were like, we could really continue talking about this. I remember it vividly and I said, any time you want, let's continue this. And we didn't, and that's totally fine because you've got your career and I've got my career and we went our separate ways. But it doesn't matter. See, we could pick that up anytime you want. And for me, that's fine.
I think that's the best type of friendships for a neurodivergent person is the one that doesn't require constant watering. Unlike those plants on my balcony during lockdown. The ones
that's
that
a good way to
you
put
can
it.
almost just... And it's not a selfish thing. It sounds like, that's just an excuse. But the types of friendships where you can essentially just ignore for months, maybe even years, but you can just come back together and it's like no time has passed. I think they're the...
Yes. I have plenty of those types of friendships. And as soon as I walk into the room, pick up the mantle exactly where I left it. And there's no malice on either side about, but you haven't called me. There's none of that. Absolutely none of that. So there's no guilt trips, there's no shame involved, so I'm comfortable then.
You mentioned something the last time we spoke. I was keen to pick it up. Do you think someone's status in life makes an impact on how their ADHD is perceived?
Yeah. But more importantly, I think your cultural background also affects that as well. How your culture, how your society views diversity impacts on how you can deal with it as well. In the Western culture, it's often a real big issue, a real big issue. Like we talk about it, they're unusual, their brains are different, this, that, the other, they're not normal. That's why we use neuronormal or neurotypical. And then there's the other alternative, and you can call it spicy, you can call it diverse, but there's also we ascertain or we assume there is a standard, and then there is outside the standard. Now, I can't object strongly. I vehemently disagree with that. And if I haven't made that clear, I'll reiterate. I reject that notion altogether. There is a standard, and then there is an outside the standard. So when you're saying it's like, how we perceive ourselves and, whether our standing in society, how we are. I think there's a lot of factors that affect that, and that includes our society. It includes who you are, includes how much money you have, includes everything, your skin colour, includes your race, your gender. I think they all compile on to how you experience your diversity.
Someone's diversity is obviously always going to be unique from the next person, and you essentially you go up to a buffet table and you pick different traits.
That's right.
And then they add up to what society would give you a diagnosis for.
Correct. So again, I reject the notions of labels, for example. I know we call it ADHD and all that sort of stuff, and I accept that it's ADHD and I've been diagnosed with ADHD. But if we say ADHD full stop, that doesn't explain what I have at all. I have, and do you want me to reiterate? I truly believe there's a buffet of diversity at hand. And we all walk up with an empty plate and we all take a serving. We've taken obviously my protein is ADHD over here. And then there's all these other side dishes as well, right? So aphantasia, dyslexia, whatever it may be. And then that makes up my diversity. And of course, my plate's going to look different to yours. And therefore, my diagnosis, my treatment, how I walk about life, how I cope is obviously going to be different to yours. And so therefore anyone listening cannot ever say, well, she looks like she's got her, can I swear? She looks like she's got her shit together. How come I don't? I feel like crap. That's a very, very unfair statement. Hugely unfair. First of all, compassion is not complete unless it includes you, right? So focus in on that. But also the second thing is that we don't have the same plate. You need to work on what's on your plate, and your plate might be heavier than mine. That's not fair to compare.
So do you think it's a bit toxic or unhelpful when someone's watching TikTok and they self-diagnose
for sure.
when every diagnosis is as unique as a fingerprint?
Exactly. I think it is toxic. I don't think that in our industry, in this field, it's the only toxicity that exists. I think anything where we pigeonhole and say that's exactly what it looks like, and if yours looks different, it's you, that's ridiculous, right? So yes, I do. I think that is incredibly unhelpful when we're still learning. I mean, this is a whole, you're exploring, right? And we're still learning what this is, not only learning, but learning how to cope with it, learning how to succeed with it, learning everything about this. So during this journey to be able to say, and these are the traits of ADHD, and if you don't have X, Y, and blah, 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 and 5 traits, blah, 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 if you don't have these 5, are you even ADHD? What a load of shit, right? Because yours might look completely different. For example, I don't have lateness. You know that time blindness? I don't have it. But that's such a huge one for ADHD, right? Now, because I don't have time blindness, you're going to kick me out of the club? I'm not going anywhere. I've got a corner suite, I ain't going anywhere. But my point is that mine doesn't look like that, Mine looks like mine.
Were there any traits in your life that you kind of thought were weird, and then you got your diagnosis and you thought, that makes sense?
Wait, let me go get my list. Hang on. It'd be a toilet roll, one of those ones where it just goes on
Big
and on.
scroll.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that would have been a great visual. But so yes. And I think that is one of the things that a post-diagnosed person, when the life flashes past their eyes and you go, oh, that moment, yep, that explains that. Oh, that moment, that explains that. And then you cringe and you cringe and you cringe. We've all lived through that. So, yeah, there is a lot of things that I look back on and I go, wish I had known. I probably, or some of the things where I feel really sad for the younger version of me where I go, damn it, I was so hard on myself because, I didn't know.
What were the biggest pain points, the biggest examples you can think when you look back on your life that you wish you had known in that moment?
The area in which I struggled with the most, which was friendships and relationships. So I would have, if I had have known, if I was more aware, it was such a blind spot for me, but if I was more aware, I would have been able to cope and navigate through that much more efficiently than I did. I stumbled and fumbled and really stuffed it up so beautifully, And I wish there was life had a reset button where you could redo it, but we don't have one. So I have to, so that's where I'd be like, I see the past and I cringe and all of that sort of stuff, but what do you do?
Relationships is a big one. I can think back and see if I had only just known that relationship, that argument probably wouldn't have happened. Can you see specific examples where ADHD might have been the cause of relationship problems?
Yeah. Not personal, not like intimate relationships, but friendships. Yes. Hell yes.
What happened in those friendships?
What we touched on already, too much oversharing, trying to bond in the incorrect manner, different perspectives of what intimacy looks like, or trust looks like, or vulnerability looks like.
If you could go back in time and give your younger version of Des some advice, what would you sort of whisper into your ear?
You've got ADHD. That would have been really handy.
And can you see other neurodiversity within your family?
Yeah. God, yeah, it's hereditary. Yeah, hell yeah. Yeah.
What does that look like? Sort of you paint a picture of a day in your household.
I love it because they don't, because I know. So within my immediate family, yeah. But the younger generation, my children are a lot more aware. They've got the ability, they have the privilege of, the knowledge of being diagnosed, asking for help, looking for resources, knowing earlier. And I think that is brilliant.
I've spoken to a lot of people and in the community as well, and relationships, maintaining relationships, marriages is a big struggle. How does that look like ADHD, neurodiversity in your marriage?
So I would say my partner is also neurodiverse, similar to yours, I'd say, yeah. So in which case, I think the diagnosis and the awareness has made it far more impact because now we're all aware. And we're more mindful. I'm far more mindful of his, you can call them idiosyncrasies or his things, quirks that I say, why are you doing this? You're doing this to annoy me. Whereas that's not true, and vice versa. And so a lot more patience, a lot more sort of understanding and a lot more, all right, this is part of who you are. Right. And I know I need to, for example, if I was to compare myself with my husband, he is a streamliner. Like if you look at a big cruiser, it just goes along, never changes course, stable as can be. And that's exactly what an ADHD will gravitate to because we are a jet ski, right? That's what we are, right? Changing course at any moment, right? Attracted to stability, right? So sometimes what has attracted me to him will annoy the crap out of me. It's like, oh, God's sake, can you just for one, and here I am trying to get him to be a jet ski, right? So I've now learned that no, he's going to take his time to come to his conclusion and give him the time to come to that conclusion, whatever that may be. Stop trying to make him into what I am and in vice versa. He will understand that how fast I move, how, and with the way my brain works and often gets out of my way because he also knows that the results are amazing. So just stand out of her way and watch, like that let her cook meme? Bit of that going on, yeah.
Does he have a diagnosis?
Self-diagnosed.
He has enough bits from the buffet table?
Exactly, where he would say he would be on the spectrum, yeah. Yeah. I would also agree, yeah.
And you alluded to there sometimes that can clash. Have there been any moments where there's... Of
course. Especially prior to diagnosis, you don't know that is the worst, because of course you don't know what's going on. There's no... you make... Yeah, well, also when you're younger, you expect, you're almost trying to... You find the partner who has everything that you need that's missing from you, and then you go methodically trying to change them into you, until you wake up and you go, that's not the way it works. You don't do that. So there's a bit of wisdom with age as well, compiled with the diagnosis and understanding, and a long-term relationship always ebbs and flows. And if you're never growing in your relationship and you're staying stale, that's an ending. So there's always growth. So there has to be the potential for both of you to be able to grow.
And how does ADHD help you being a mother, do you think?
I don't know if it's helped. Do you know what? You need to speak to my kids on that one. What's it like, with Des as a mum?
What do you think they'd say?
I'd be interested to hear it for sure. I'd be interested to hear it, mindful of that they're in their teenage years and their early 20s. But, knowing that they're all got diversity as well. So, yeah, I don't know what they would say, and I don't presume to know, by the way. I think that's their journey and their experience, and I can't even say this is their experience of what it's like to be a child from my parenting. But as a parent, it means that I could look after, like I could juggle effectively and not get exhausted from doing some of the stuff. Like I travelled with my kids for work, and I used to strap my son to my back and go and do business and go into business and stuff like that. People go, how do you get on a plane with 4 kids? And I sit there and think, I don't even understand the question. What do you mean? Like, what are you trying to say? And they're like, it's just chaos. And I'm like, I suppose it is, when you look at it like that, but it never appeared to me like that because I can handle chaos. That's a walk in the park.
I suppose, are there any heart-wrenching moments as a mother that you have seeing any struggles your children might be going through because of their diversity?
Yeah, there's an awful and painful memory that I have to live with, and that is when I found out my daughter had autism. And at that stage, I wasn't diagnosed, and all I knew, there was something wrong with my daughter. And I did not handle that well. And I did not know how to handle that well, but my daughter, being ever so vigilant, saw her mother cry. And so I internalized that as this is bad, this is awful. And I instilled shame into her, unwittingly, but I did. And I deeply regret that. We have talked about that since. I do this as penance, to remove the shame that anyone would have.
Have you made a positive movement now towards?
We've talked about, her and I have talked about that, and I have apologised deeply that came from a space of just confusion and unknowing, and any child hearing about their daughter or their child bit something wrong, every mother, no one wants to hear that. And I think the way I see it now is the way I was told that there's something wrong with the system telling you that there's something wrong because of neurodiversity, you see? So I should have been told she's neurodiverse, The way it was painted was like, well, she's autistic, and then there was ... and this means X, Y, Z, right? Whereas the reality is I wouldn't swap her for the world. I love her for everything she is.
Do you think the stigma of autism played a part in your reaction
at that time? Of course, because when you think of autism, I grew up in the era where autism was Rain Man. Yeah, of course. Which is why I'm here now combating that, doing everything I can and I hope that more and more people come out as autistic, because we need to see people as being autistic who aren't Rain Man. You know what I'm saying? Like who are so to remove the shame. And I know we say ADHD, and ADHD is maybe the crowbar leverage to a deeper conversation of autism, But to me, and this is why I say it's a buffet table, neurodiversity is neurodiversity.
How do you think your daughter will feel when she watches this?
I'd be very surprised if she watches this. That nothing I've said hasn't already been said in private and hasn't already been said to her, and isn't already stuff that she knows. By the way, she's the one who coined neuro-spicy as well way back in the day, and we made stickers way back in the day too, yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Oh. How do you think neurodiversity has served us as a species? Yeah.
It's pushed us forward. Anything that's been phenomenal in humanity, all the way back from our evolution of humans, it's been the diverse people who are thinking outside the box. Humanity needs us, always needs us. I think the reason why we don't cope is that on the general, we're living such boring lives, in such boring Western world, boring lives. But if there was, and I think we mentioned this last time, if there was a crisis like a pandemic or like a war, God forbid, right? But if there is such chaos that's when you need us, because no one will outthink us. We'll come up with the solutions. We are at our most peaceful, most of us. Some was going to say, oh, but not me. I didn't like. Yeah, I know. I know that. But most of us will come alive and then know what to do.
Great in a crisis.
Great in a
crisis. Things go wrong and everyone's panicking.
And humanity needs that.
Navigating the path to success.
Now, you think of all of the changes in the world. You think of all the leaders, the movers, the shakers, the ones who really, really made a difference. I'm going to bet diversity.
Do you think autism needs to have its day in the same way that ADHD and other conditions are having their day? Lots of people are coming out. ADHD is it's not a trend, it's not trendy, but it's considerably less stigmatized over the last 24 months because of lots of famous people, lots of people talking about it, coming out, things like this, if I'm honest. Do you think autism needs its day?
More than ever. More than ever. Because I think that ADHD, I'm not sure if that ever had the shame and the stigma surrounding it the way autism did. Like one movie, really, look at the damage that did, right? So we need maybe 10 movies showing autism in a much more positive light.
Do you think there's a correlation between autism and high-functioning, successful people?
I think it's a spectrum. I think there's autism is like I've got a lot of friends with autism and ADHD or neurodiversity and all that. To me, it's all diversity, right? We're all X-Men. Yeah, I think we have to learn. That's a coping mechanism, becoming highly functional. If you can, if your diversity allows you to be highly functioning, and along comes with that the blessings of being anxious, riddled, and all that. And do you know why? Because we're not allowed to. We're like a caged tiger. We're not allowed to be ourselves. We have to conform, right? That's why. So if you want to start, you have to start by changing our societal expectations, like if you really want to start on that stuff. And that starts at school probably, yeah.
You clearly view your ADHD as a gift and a benefit, almost associating
and a curse.
it.
At the same breath, I'll say, and a curse, yeah.
If you were to look at it as a ratio, what would be the percentage of the benefit to the percentage of the curse?
I think it's like that old adage, the two wolves within you, which one do you feed? I chose to feed the gift.
There will be a lot of people listening who don't see any, if at all, of the positive side, and they're really struggling. Yep. What do you think it is about you then that you've been able to frame it in such a positive way, almost to make it sound a bit like a superpower?
Nothing changes but perspective. I've chosen this perspective, yeah. So often it's a conscious choice. There are times where I am admitting it's a curse as well. There are times where it has manifested in ways that has ruined certain things for me. I can focus in on that too and make a day out of it. Often it's a conscious choice to focus in on the parts that are good.
I want to ask you a question. It's in the washing machine of woes. I don't know if I explained this before.
Go ahead.
Every week I ask my Instagram community for their ADHD woes and I put it in the washing machine because for me, and I want to ask you if it's the same, the washing machine represents my biggest woe, which is memory loss, because I always leave my laundry in the machine. You leave your washing in the machine often?
Yes.
You've got that from the buffet table as well?
Yes, I did, yes. Many of times I've had to rewash towels, yes.
This week, in the machine, we have, I'm neurodiverse and my children have autism and ADHD, but they feel we are just dysfunctional as a family. Is there anything you can suggest to make us feel like a special family as opposed to a strange one?
That's a matter of perspective. You are a special family. That's it. That's a matter of the perspective. Again, nothing changes but perspective. So I would question and internally challenge what made you feel that they were, what was the word that they were using? Not a special family, but a dysfunctional? Or
dysfunctional.
What was the last word they used? Not
strange.
Strange. See, strange is a word that's been foisted onto them. Yeah. They didn't go around picking that up. They've been told they're strange. Yeah. And I would question and challenge that question. Who put that notion in your mind that you're strange? Good Lord. I think there's nothing more stranger than neuro-beige people, I'll be honest. Some of the shite they do is strange to me. So it's perspective, isn't it? Yeah. So families, for starters, you have a family. That's a blessing. You have children. That's a blessing. You know, look for the things that bring you joy and measure it in your way. So, like, not in the way society wants you to.
Were you proud to be different even before your diagnosis?
No, I was steeped in shame. I wanted nothing more than to fit in and be like everybody else. I wasted a good amount of time, Alex, trying to be liked. Yeah.
Where do you think that came from?
I think inherently, as every woman will know, we're told to do that. You know?
By who?
Society. Yeah. Expectation is, you know, be good, be liked, be wanted, be whatever, you know, X, Y, Z, do all of that. And so you spend, that's your 20s, and you spend your 30s, 40s and beyond undoing all of that crap. And then once you've taken on the layer of neurodiversity and understood that, and then you go, oh, crikey, this is just a whole different layer. You know, everyone was dealing with cake and we've got parfait, you know, different.
What do you think the costs are of not undoing that?
I think you're very often the essence of who you are. You'll never understand who you are if you never get to meet you. You know what I mean? If you don't peel down to the core of you and have the freedom to be yourself and the safe space to be yourself. So this woman who's talking about her children being strange and her family being strange, you know, imagine if she was in a society where no one said strange. No one, that's how they are, and just accepted them for who they were. Stand a little taller, right? Yeah. So the cost of not finding and not doing the work, that's a really heavy toll. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. I liken it to people who have to hide their identity, hide their sexuality, hide their anything for the rest of their lives. That's rubbish, you know? We all know the value of living your authentic life, being true to yourself. Yeah.
Was there a particular moment when you realised that the version of Dez that you were presenting to the world wasn't in line with who Dez was underneath?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because the more I shined, the more I allowed myself to be me, the more successful I was, right? So pretending, this is going to be breakthrough news, didn't work, right? Shattering, I know. Pretending to be not me was not a really good strategy. So being me, authentically me, turned out to be really, really good for me in every way possible. I've yet to meet someone who said, I finally accept myself and I finally love who I am, and it's been really shit. Yet to meet that person.
And how was your self-esteem through that process? Did it increase?
Well, that's a really good question. I'll tell you why, because early on, I actually thought there was nothing wrong with my self-esteem. I honestly thought my self-esteem was perhaps higher than most. I used to think I had a really good self-esteem, right? But I was measuring self-esteem incorrectly. I was measuring self-esteem not on the scale of, I don't know, differently. I was measuring it. When I realised that, in effect, my self-esteem was incredibly low, so rubbish that my consciousness was hiding parts of trauma and all that sort of stuff away from me, that the brain is powerful enough to do that, that was an awakening moment. You know, I don't know if that resonates with anybody, but yeah, that was an awakening moment that I didn't even know that there were parts that I had to unravel. Once I unraveled them, and Lord, that was hard. That was a difficult walk I wouldn't wish on my enemies. The reward, however, was a more authentic me and a more peaceful me. It's a lot more peaceful in my mind now than it was before.
And if someone's going through the process of trying to unmask and find out who they really are, do you have any advice for someone who's starting that journey?
It's going to be really hard and it's going to suck badly. There were times when I would come out with a full body rash, like physical manifestations. There were times where I would walk into a therapy session, for example, and come out with my body aching like a full body cold, I was talking about just the physical manifest. It felt like poison oozing out of me. It was a difficult path. The only thing I can say is keep going.
And when you lifted that mask, was there anything that you didn't like? Anything you saw that you didn't like?
About me? No, because it's funny that once you actually accept, once you face yourself and you show compassion to yourself, if there's things you don't like, you haven't reached the core of you yet. Because the core of you is non-judgmental. The core of you is just you, right? So if you haven't gone there yet, you need to keep going.
Des, we've got a closing tradition on the podcast, and I ask all my guests, what's the most impulsive thing you've ever done?
Yeah, that would not be a one-item thing. That would be a scroll full of items where it would unfurl and then roll onto the floor. And we would go through them much like Santa with his list. So a lot of impulsive things I have done. A lot. Sometimes they've been brilliant.
If there was one at the top of this scroll, and I think the scroll is going to be your ADHD item by the sounds of it.
Okay.
What would the top one be?
There's a lot of impulsiveness there. I think getting into a relationship, getting married, impulsive.
And it's lasted?
Through thick and thin, better or worse, rich, poor. It was almost like a to-do list. We really went through it, Yeah.
What was the gap between proposal and the marriage?
So, no, it was asked around. So I refused to get married. I didn't want any of that stuff for various reasons. And he really did. And I said, no, it ain't going to happen. And even to start up a relationship was impulsive. And to stay in the relationship was impulsive. To get married was impulsive. So actually the marriage part wasn't impulsive so much, because the only thing that sealed the deal for me is that my daughter came along, right? And I had said originally I would not, the only reason I would get married if there were children involved. I saw no reason for this institution, right? Until this happened and blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. But to get together was very impulsive, yeah.
And the reason for not wanting to get married, it was just because of the not wanting to be a part of an institution? Was there anything else?
No, it was deeper than that. I actually was, ironically, diagnosed as infertile. And so I had said would never get married, would never tie any man down, because at some stage he's going to work out, he's going to want a family, and I ain't going through that. Yeah.
And then you had a child.
That's right. That's right.
That sounds like a whole other podcast.
That sounds like a whole other podcast where I kicked infertility's ass and then had 4. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's some great news to end on.
Yeah.
Belated congratulations. And what a nice tone to end the episode on.
Yeah.
Des, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you very much.
Thank you again for having me.